Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Mr. King Randall. Mr. Randall, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Hi, sir. How you doing?
Man, it's a pleasure having you here. And I must say, I commend you on the great work that you're doing. But I want to say, Mr. Randall is a community shifter. He's also the founder of the Preparatory School for Boys and also the founder of the X for Boys, which we'll get into the conversation more about the work that he's doing. And as I said, I really appreciate the work that he's doing, especially for our young boys to prepare them for the future. But before we get into the conversation itself, I will have Mr. Randall share more about himself so you can get to know who he is before we start the conversation today. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you. For one, I want to say thank you for having me on the show. Glad to be here. First off, my name is King Randall again. I'm the founder of the X for Boys program and the Life Preparatory School. This program began back in 2019, the X for Boys program. I started out teaching young men how to work on cars and houses, teaching them how to read. And this is simple automotive repair, such as changing oil, changing brakes, checking fluids, changing wiper blades, from changing toilets to changing ceiling fans to painting. We were doing all these different workshops, and it's very important for our boys to know. And just in the midst of teaching our young men these different trades, I was discovering that many young men did not know how to read. This is a big issue for me. And seeing that so many children that we had in our hometown whom have lived in the city of Albany their whole lives, where I have lived, to see them passing through so many different grades, not knowing how to read, this is a huge issue for me. And this is where I had the idea to want to open the Life Preparatory School for Boys, to teach young men what they should be knowing, such as the different skilled trades, but also education, but also to teach these young men different things that they should know, from hygiene to religion, to making sure that they're taking care of their bodies, working out, etc., and to try and curb what's being pushed on our young men and this attack on masculinity. And truly what we need in our lives, especially for young men, is some true masculinity. That's what they need. They need their fathers. They need men. They need mentors. They need coaches. They need whatever, as many men as possible in their lives. Our boys are truly lacking that, and it's been done strategically and systemically, and we want to make sure we do something to curb that. But that's a brief idea of who I am and what I do.
Man, that's great, which we think we will cover in the conversation. But as I went through your bio, I realized that you got your culinary degree before you graduated high school. That's an achievement. And I think also that is an inspiration to the young men that you're working with. Because if you have done it, it's not that you're telling them to do something. It's that you have done it. So, and I think that's the easiest way to inspire and empower our young men and the next generation through being the example. So I also commend you on that. But I know we'll be touching more on some of the things that you have accomplished in your young age, because I think it's an inspiration for the next generation, because once they can see it, it's easier for them to be it. And I think that's what you are demonstrating to these young men. So I'm going to go into my first question that I have for you today. What is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
I don't even think it's just the mindset. It should be just who you are. You have to want to do these things because a lot of it does take a lot of doing stuff when you don't want to do it, getting up when you don't feel like it, working when you don't feel like it. It's a lot, just taking charge and listening to the stories of these young men, having to deal with their parents and deal with their family stories and their histories, etc. It is a lot to deal with mentally. So you have to want to do it. You have to want to see your community better, because I know a lot of us, will complain about our communities and say they should be this or that when we are in control of our everyday communities, not the politicians that we're voting for, etc. We are in charge of our everyday communities. And this is why I talk about the things that I do, because I'm just like, if I weren't to have started my organization, the many young men that I've affected would have never been affected. Nobody would have ever touched them the way that I have. Nobody would have, given to them, important to them the way that I have. And I'm just one person, and I started when I was 19. Imagine if all the men in the community decided to be responsible for at least one child that wasn't theirs. And I think, me taking on 20, 30, or 40 at a time I think some men in the community can afford to get one child and take him to school every day and, make sure he has food, etc., without having to be with their mom, but just make sure you're providing a safe space for that child. You do that, and every man's doing that, especially men that don't have children. I would think that's a huge impact that we could just have on our communities, from the kids knowing how to read, making better decisions, not, getting into gang culture, etc. These are things that we could change. So I guess I would say, it has to be somebody, that you are. The mindset for me that's me. That's how I was raised. I never, lived a life where I didn't see men responsible for the community. That's the neighborhood I grew up in. Even though it wasn't the best neighborhood in the world, all the men in the community were a part, of it. And I was raised with my stepdad and the deacon that lived behind our house, the guy across the street, the truck driver down the road. All these men helped mold us in that community, and it was something special. My grandfather, etc. So I never lived a life where I didn't see men responsible for the whole community. All the kids in the neighborhood would come to our house, for Bible study, etc. My mom would cook for them. They would come to our backyard. We would, grow our own food, etc. So these are things that I wanted to see done in my hometown. I'm thinking that a lot of young men are getting the same teaching that I am and realizing that they're not. And that's a huge, huge thing for me. It's seeing the changes in the community that I'm making and wanting to see that happen with others. So I think the mindset again is to want to do it. You have to want to do it, and you have to want to see the community better, not just yapping about it, but actually doing something about it.
Man, that is well said, I should say. And that's how we're going to create change,
Mm.
by wanting to do it. And I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. And it's a great reminder to all of us as men, where we don't have to wait to have organization. We can be the role model for at least one young Black male in the
Mhm.
community.
Yeah.
And you said something that I really think is really profound, where you said we have to take charge of our community and don't
Mhm.
wait on the politicians to do the work, because we are in the community. And sometimes most of the politicians are not there in the community. So
Mhm.
it should be our responsibility to want to see change and progress within our community. But
Mhm.
as you were talking about the experience and the things that you have seen, and that you have started this at age 19, but what one story that you have experienced that really say, yes, man, I'm glad that I started this? I know you said you have impacted so many Black male students,
Mhm.
but what one story that really say, you know what, man, I'm glad I started this?
It's not necessarily a positive, well, I mean, it's a positive thing that happened for the young man, but the situation in itself, was not a good situation. So when I first started the school, we were doing a boarding portion of the school, and the kids were living with us. And I came into contact with a young man when we were starting the school. We had a couple kids that would pee the bed sometime. That's normal or whatever for that age group, 10, 11. But as one child, he would, consistently use the restroom in the bed. He would constantly pee in the bed. And to the point we had to start giving him like the pins to wear at nighttime. I'm like, son, why can't you stop using the restroom, in the bed? Like, are you not dreaming about the toilet and can't get up and go or whatever? Like, what's happening? So, but not only that, the smell from his urine was like a different smell. Because other kids had, peed the bed and then, just regular pee. Like when he would do it, it would like fill the halls like of the entire school. Like, and we had to throw out his mattresses and leave the plastic on his mattresses for us to be able to save them. And I was just trying to figure out what was going on. And so when it was time for a Thanksgiving break, this young man, I was always weary of the kids that didn't want to go home. Like I had some kids that didn't want to go home, but he was like, I really do not want to go home. And I'm just like, son, you got to go home. Everything gonna be all right or whatever. He comes back to school and his jaw was swollen. And I asked him, I'm just like, son, why is your jaw swollen? And he's just saying, well, my cousin punched me in the face and he kicked me in the face. And I'm just like, okay, why did your cousin punch or kick you in the face? How old is your cousin? He's like, well, he 13 and he's just like 2 years older than him. I'm like, well, what y'all fighting for? Whatever like that. He was like, well, my mom let him discipline me whenever I get in trouble. When I got in trouble at school, he that's his way of like disciplining me for getting in trouble or whatever like that. I'm just like, okay, that's crazy, but I have to report this stuff because absolutely not. So of course I dig into the conversation with him, and we began speaking. I'm just like, well, what's he doing? He's just like, well, he makes me lay down. He start punching me and kicking me or whatever like that. And then I'm like, okay. I said he made me take my shirt off. I'm like, okay. And he was like, he started punching me in the chest. He kicked me in the chest or whatever like that. And then he was like, well, he made me put my pants down. I'm like, why he make you put your pants down? Like, to whoop you? And he was like, no. I was like, okay, he pulling your pants down? He was like, yeah, and he pulling my underwear down too. And I'm like, okay, then what's happening? And he was like, well, he made me, anyway, it went all the way there for the sake of the interview. And to have to tell his mom, first of all, this woman is a remarkable woman. And, to see her just working so hard, trying to give her son the best that she can or whatever like that. When I told her, like, she was hysterical, about it because she just couldn't believe it. She just like, I'm sending him somewhere every day. I'm thinking he's okay. And this has been happening for a long time.
Wow.
And for him to finally had been able to tell me, what had been happening. And I just thought about, like, what if I hadn't opened up the school?
Correct.
Like, what if we'd never done any of this stuff? What if I just decided to just keep on waiting for a vote or keep on waiting for politicians to do something or keep pointing the finger at everybody, and I wasn't able to save that young man from what was happening to him and at home with a family member? Like that, these are reasons I'm glad that I started the organization, and other stories we got, many stories we have. So for some time, I get frustrated with people who just want you to just, cozy up the politicians and this and that and legislation and all that. That's all fine and dandy, but that's never going to make as big of an impact as you actually being in your communities every day, with these children and their stories. These children are looking for something different. They're looking for a new life. They're looking for, love. And sometimes it comes in the streets. Usually that's where it comes from. First, people that seem like they care about you and want to help you and give you some money, etc. We have a responsibility as men to make those things happen for these young men in our communities.
That's a great story, I should say, just for you to having that encounter with that student, to get him to get away from that situation, bring that awareness to his parents. So that in itself, man, just you having the school is just remarkable. And even students that you may have seen that don't want to go home, maybe the situation is not the same, but they may have challenges at home and they don't want to be in the environment where they will be abused. They want to be in a safe space. So I appreciate you sharing that. And which leads me to my next question. And you somewhat touched on it, where as Black men, we need to do the work. So my next question to you, how can we as Black men help to change the narrative? I know you have touched on it a bit, but I still want to ask that question and to give you the opportunity to share more on what we can do. And we can choose, and you can choose any narrative that you want to talk about as Black men, what we can do to change the narrative.
Yeah, simply, just like we just spoke about, getting out and doing it ourselves. Again, how do we change a narrative? By being the different narrative that we want to see. You have to be that. We cannot, go and tell people what they should think about us or tell people what the narrative should be. Show them the narrative. If you want to see something different, show them that. And people can't argue with action. We can argue all day via keyboards and podcasts or whatever, and that's all going to be arguments. Nobody can argue with the action, even, with me. But people try to say things or whatever like that. Nobody could ever argue with what we are doing. You can argue about philosophy. You can argue about, this or that. Can't argue about the actual work. And that's important. And that's what we can do in our communities. That's how we change the narrative, because I have my own narrative because I created one. And that's the same thing, we could do as a community. We create our own narrative by being the narrative. You have to be that. More is caught than taught.
Man, that is really profound. And again, a great reminder that we should not wait and we should be the narrative we want to see. Because as you said, that once we're doing the work, they can't say anything about it. Well, they can say what they want to say about it or about you. But once you're doing the work, they can't take that away, despite what opinions they want to
Right.
say or want to have. So it's important that as men, we be the example and be the narrative. And society can, which they already painted a certain narrative of us as Black men. But if it's going to change, we have to be the narrative. We have to be the change we want to see. So, what advice would you have for men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change
Sure.
outside of just being out there in the community?
So I know I get a lot of people actually ask me all the time, like, what can they do to get started or what have you. And usually I'm telling men, because a lot of people think that you need a lot to get started. For one, I want to begin with how I got started and what resources I had. I had none. I had no resources. I
Wow.
simply had my home, and where I was living, and the idea to want to teach some children, these different things. I made some flyers on my phone, on an app. I went and printed them out at Staples. I went and passed those flyers out at basketball practices, football practices, places that I knew children would be. I posted on Facebook. I sent the email to churches. And my first workshop, I had 25 kids there. Out of all the flyers I passed out, it was fantastic to see those young men show up. I went and printed out some certificates at the library that I created, on my phone, and gave those children certificates. Did I have a dime? No, I did not. It cost me about $2 to print those certificates. It costed me nothing to send emails. It costed me nothing to create the flyer on my phone. A lot of it is, again, just have to do with what you got. First thing you could do is find a way to make somebody smile. I always say that every single day. If everybody once a day did something to make somebody smile, our communities would be in a different place. And not to mention, all the different things you can do to affect your community. I always tell men, I'm just like, you don't have to go take 40 and 50 kids like I'm doing. Go find a kid that you always see all the time that's walking home every day, and go make a relationship with their parents and go and start mentoring that child. The schools also offer opportunities for people to come and mentor the children at the schools. There are many different opportunities for men to get involved in their communities. If it doesn't involve you starting your own organization, boys and girls clubs, etc., there are many volunteer organizations that you can get involved with to help, volunteering on football teams, basketball teams, whatever. If you truly want to make an impact, that's how you do it. You start with those children, and you dig into those different areas where those children may need the help. And you may not have to, do it as bad as me, but I bought a building out in the projects. And when we're doing workshops outside, those kids come walking down, to come see what we're doing. And that's how we get started. I have a basketball court on the land. They'll be jumping the gate trying to play basketball, and you can't play basketball unless you come over here to the workshop. Like, you have to meet them where they are, and that's how you slowly begin to change. I know sometimes people get frustrated because they think they're going to see the changes tomorrow. When I first started the organization, I mean, I couldn't see any of the changes that were being made immediately.
Right.
2-3 years ago, I got kids, going to college and stuff I hadn't seen in a year or two, and they called me back and say, "Mr. King, hey, this is such and such. I hadn't seen you in about 2 years, but I appreciate all the stuff that you were telling me back when I was 16, 15 years old. Everything that you said, is true, and I just appreciate everything you taught me, all the stuff we did, etc." Never heard from him again. But that's how I know I sent out a great young man to go into whatever community he's going to. That is what it's about, not immediate gratification, not immediate stuff. I had kids that just graduated high school back in May. And I had like 4 more kids graduate from the program, to graduate high school. Kids are going on to do bigger and better things. And to just watch them cross the stage after having saw them when they were like 13, trying to figure themselves out, and going to discipline them because they're doing stuff they ain't got no business, and just all of those nights of calling their phones and making them go run outside and fussing at them and cussing them out and all that stuff, just all the stuff that they're doing. And to see them walk across the stage and wanting to make sure that I'm there, that's what you do it for. That's why you do it. It takes time. It's not an overnight process. You're not going to see a kid change in a day. The kids you run into, it took him 13 years to get the way he is now. What make you think it's going to take a week, to fix him? So it just takes some dedication and time to want to put into your communities. And I promise you, if you wanted to affect your communities, there's a million different ways that you can do so, and many organizations in your local area that do need the volunteers. And if you don't want to go to local organizations, I promise you, somewhere in your neighborhood where you live, there are some children right now without a father who need the guidance.
And thanks for that reminder, because I think that is really important, because sometimes what we do think we need to have a lot of resources to start. We need to be a part of a particular organization that's doing it. But we can be that one person, as you mentioned, to help that one child in the community. And it's that same child that we sometimes see seems to be undisciplined, but we can help them. But I'm also glad that you shared that we have to understand that meeting a child one or twice per week, or even every day for a week, will not change them, because they have more than years of things that they have gone through. And they may be still dealing with traumas that we're not really aware of. And so whatever we're doing may not have them change immediately. So we have to learn to be patient with the young people that we choose to work with. So I really appreciate you sharing that and providing that reminder of what we can do to make a difference, which leads me to my next question. And I think you may have shared it to some extent, but what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
I definitely, attribute the way that I am and my character to the men that raised me and the ideas that I've had growing up. I honestly couldn't tell you where the ideas came from. I just believe God just touched me, I guess, and some of the ideas that I come up with are outlandish and things I've never seen before, but they get done. And I'm happy, to attribute that to God. But I will say Booker T. Washington is a big inspiration. I believe, his story needs to be told a little bit more, from him being a former slave to teaching himself how to read and write, from working to working a job to building his own school literally by hand, and still has a standing school today. That is remarkable to me. And I'm just glad to have read his story, hear about his story, and teach his story to our young men. I have our students read his book Up from Slavery. Is really kind of a slave narrative, and to see a former slave have a better vocabulary than myself and us here in 2024 speaks volumes, because imagine if they would have had the resources we have to be able to look things up like that,
Yeah,
find things like this, like, I mean, it's insane. I believe how smart they would have been
correct.
coming out of slavery and having all the resources that we did, from people having to have gotten their tongues cut out and hung and killed for knowing how to read. It is a slap in the face to our ancestors for our sons to be out here can't even read cat dog. It's insane.
Man, that is really profound. And I'm really glad that you shared the story of Booker T. Washington, because, as you said, he taught himself how to read. And I think then they had this determination
Yep.
to break away from the bondage or the stronghold that was placed on them. And I
Hmm.
think that's what we have to bring back in our community, where we cultivate that determination in our young men. And you sharing that story with them, I think that is really important, because they can see someone who did not have what they currently have
Hmm.
and still make something of himself. Not only make something of himself, he become like an outstanding person that he could be able to influence us today. So I think what you're doing, especially with that his story, sharing with the young man, young boys that you're working with, is really impactful to help them to see beyond their immediate environment. Because they've seen a lot, but when they can learn from someone who didn't have access and still overcome those challenges to become who he is or who he was, because he's still inspiring us. So
I
who
agree.
is and stuff like that. So we have to really acknowledge our ancestors and really know that, as you mentioned, it's a slap in the face not to be able to do certain things today, knowing that they had less than we do today to achieve the success they have achieved. So I appreciate you sharing that with the young men, and maybe something that we all can do as Black men. Look back on some of the stories or some of the successes of those who came before us, who had less than we do, and use it as tools to empower the young people that we choose to work with. Which leads me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Okay, I think, where we are, I mean, it's designed to be the way that it is right now.
Yeah.
Especially with us doing this whole fighting Black women deal and men versus women and all that stuff. It's all by design. We all need each other. But it's come to a point now where they've made us against,
Each other.
one another purposely, to a point where it's almost like we refuse to work together with anything, without somebody having to be the head, or without somebody saying, oh, well, I don't like your philosophy on this or that or whatever. So it's very tough trying to find people and men that want to work together. And it's all being done strategically, even just down to how our family structure is now, men not being in home, etc. I believe, we are in a bad place, but it's up to us to fix it. It's not unfixable. It's going to take time. But I believe we fix it by training our replacements, and those are the children that are coming up under us. If we're not focused on training replacements, we have not seen the worst of what will happen in this country at all. If we look at the conditions of our schools, look at where our children are, the conversations they're having, where their minds are. If I just tell the regular person, just go to any high school right now and just go talk to the kids, insanity. I mean, where their minds are is completely insane. And I don't think we really understand. Those are the people that'll be here in 20 to 30 years, that'll be adults, full grown adults, and thinking the way they are, maneuvering the way they have been raised exclusively by social media. It's scary to see, but if Black men don't stand up and take hold and take a grip to our communities, we will fail everywhere.
Man, it is really alarming. Even though I've seen more of us doing good work, and I try to reach out to as many Black men that I'm seeing being engaging in the community or trying to do something impactful. But what you said is really important. And it's a great reminder that we have to take charge of the change. And I think I was reading a report, Black students and how they are performing. And the report had Black students or the schools with, I will not share the state right now, but it was like 29%
Mhm.
of the students are Black students, or the schools with the most Black students. That's their performance. 29% of the students were performing at optimum. You see what I'm saying? So that's still really alarming when you look at, as you mentioned, where they're going to be later and how social media is the thing that raising these kids. And if we as Black men don't do our part and really stand up and
Mhm.
do our part, things are going to be really crazy
Yeah.
in 20, 30 years from now. So we
Mhm.
have to really take charge of what we want to see change within our communities. It doesn't make sense that we overcome certain things or achieve certain degrees or qualifications and just enjoy what we can out of what we have done. Our responsibility is to prepare the next generation. I strongly believe that. And one of my mentor, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, he's at Clark University. He always say to me, the work that we do is the rent for the time we are here on earth. So
Mhm.
we must dedicate ourselves to be of service, especially to the next generation, because it's our responsibility to make sure they are better than we are. Because if we don't make them better, as you mentioned, we fail.
Yep.
As a community, we can't afford to fail going forward. So, man, I'm really glad that you touched on that point, because it served as a great reminder to all of us. So that leads me to my next question. What change do you want to see in general and amongst Black men? I know you have mentioned it, that we need to be there in the community, but if you could share and remind us, all of us, because we're all a part of what needs to be done. What change do you want to see in general amongst us as Black men?
We need to have more children and take care of them all. That's something I wish to see. We're not looking at the birth rates and the percentages in our community, and I think that a lot of men and their kids' moms, etc. I think those men who have multiple baby mamas or whatever like that have a responsibility to gather those families and take care of those women. Take care of those women and take care of those children and to mend those relationships. I believe they have a responsibility to do so. If we're going to have a lot of children, we should be able to take care of them all, which means you need to work harder. I would like for men that do have kids to start taking care of them. Those that don't, start having them, and not just having 2 or 3. We need to get back to having 7, 8, 9, 10 kids, and not just that, but taking care of them also, because you don't realize also you're creating your own community with your kids. And looking at where this world is headed, I would never send my sons out in the world when it's only just 2 of them or 3 of them. Absolutely not. They need a clan. They need each other. So imagine them, okay, well, we got this going on, but I got 8 brothers and 2 sisters or whatever. We gonna do this thing together. Like, you got a clan now. You got a community. We can't do that with two kids, 3 kids, and trying to live the American pie dream and just die and all that. Not realizing you got grandkids that are gonna live. I tell my students to live for your grandkids. I got grandkids that gotta come. I got stuff I'm trying to do right now, so they are straight. So my children's children are fine, and their children that are after that I may or may not see. Make sure they're okay. So they have an estate. We have lost our way. Back in, back yonder or whatever, it was all about your last name and who you were the son of. I'm the son of such and such. It was strength in that. We've completely lost that. Like, my sons are going to be able to, I am the son of King Randall. I'm King Randall II. I'm King William. I'm King Alexander. These are all of my sons, currently. But this is my father. This is our legacy. We are going to carry that name, and they're going to put that burden on their sons. It's very important, for us to get back to that. But I don't plan on, just having a small amount of children. I just had my 3rd son, but we got to have kids, and we've lost that, because if we look at it, a lot of men that do have kids in the Black community, the Black men that do have kids are the degenerates, have 8 and 9 kids that they're not taking care of. But you have men like me who take care of kids and will have 1 or 2 kids. Our kids are never going to be able to compete with 9 degenerates to 2, well-raised children. That's not how it's going to work. That's not going to ever work. We, as men who are capable of taking care of families and children, we need to have babies, because otherwise our communities are going to continue to be populated with more degeneracy, and hate to say it like that, but that's just what it is, because nobody's raising those kids. They're being raised by social media. They don't have fathers in their lives. Their moms are going out yonder. What's happening to them? We have created a degenerate gang member, et cetera, whatever's happening to them. Every story that I see like that is usually always the same backstory. No father, mom's working a ton of jobs. If she's not working a ton of jobs, she's acting crazy or whatever. It's very seldom that I see a kid with no dad that's just living a normal life. You might get 1 or 2 out of 20, but the other ones have completely lost their way. They've completely lost their minds. And it took, somebody to come and mentor them to get them back on track. But those of us men that can take care of kids, we need to start having them. I say that all the time. Start having kids, have many of them, and stop letting people tell you it's hard or blah, blah, blah. Have kids. Have them. You will be okay. It's not that hard. Go work hard and make more money. I promise you there's ways to do that.
Man, and I really like how you said it, from making sure we honor our name and keep that legacy going, and also to be a mentor. And yes, in our communities, if the kids don't have their fathers, it can be negatively affecting them. And then when it affects them negatively, it also affects our community. But also, as you shared, where those who already have the kids out there, 7, 8 kids, need to find a way to get back into their kids' life. And I think that is really important. And if we're going to change anything in our community as men, if we have to make sure we are a part of our kids' life, despite what happened between the dad and the mom. I think it's important that the father, to some extent, to see how can I play a role. Although I've come across fathers, Black men, who having struggles, challenges, getting to access to their kids. But I think we have to find a way, or maybe there are ways out there where they can challenge the system to get access to their kids. But as you mentioned, if the kids are there, that means we have to work harder so we can support them, because I think that is also important. It's not just having the kids, but creating the means to support them, because if they're there, they're going to need support. And if we're not making ourselves available to support them, that also will be a challenge. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that is something that we need to think about as we go forward. And as I mentioned, like 10 kids back in the days, for real, like our grandparents are, so they had like 12,
Yep.
14
Many
siblings.
kids. Many kids.
Yeah, they have like 12, 14 siblings. So, and our current generation, that's not the case when
Right.
it comes to family and the amount of siblings and stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
which leads me to my next question. I know you have shared a lot about, your experience and what you need to see change, but what was a pivotal moment
Mhm.
in your life?
It's hard to answer that question because I haven't had I grew up pretty normal.
Mhm.
I didn't have any crazy stories. Mom wasn't on crack or nothing like that, and don't have any abuse story or anything. I don't have any like crazy pivotal things that have happened.
But
I
but but
just
but
go
let
ahead.
me let me let me say this. When I look through your bio, I know you have rebirthed the I Am a Man March. Also, you graduated with a culinary degree at
Mhm,
17 before high school.
mhm.
Although you didn't have no traumatic experience, but any of those moments really give you that perspective that, what, I couldn't really be the community shifter as you are right now, a community shifter. So those could be, and as you mentioned that you have 3 sons. So any of those moments, like graduating at 17 with your culinary degree before you finish high school, how was that? How did you feel about that accomplishment?
My family, growing up, I used to get in trouble for making a B. So a lot of it was expected. So when I was doing college, while I was in high school, I was driving to class every day. I had my license, so I was driving to class, and I was up at nighttime doing catering events, for the school and things like that. So and I got it in a year and a half. It was under 2 years. So
Wow.
I was cramming classes, in the summertime. I wasn't taking a break. I was just school, 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 school for that past 2 years. I was captain of a culinary team in high school. So you're talking about doing practices with them at nighttime, trying to make sure we win the state championship. And it was a lot. It was a lot for them. But even going into the I Am a Man March, I remember this. I was about 20 years old when we did the I Am a Man March here in Albany, Georgia. And it was a great event to see so many men from our community, gather themselves and talk about fixing our community. It was a beautiful thing to see. And I guess we could say, at that point, I saw, the men that were rallying, and I'm like, guys, we could really do something in our community if we tried to, if we wanted to, we could make something happen. And I guess at that point, I saw, and started speaking to men. But even then, I was doing, black male conferences and trying to talk to men about doing stuff in our communities, and people loved to hear me talk, but nobody wanted to actually do the things that I was talking about. Like I went months doing speaking engagements and I'm like, okay, guys, we need to go and do this. And everybody's like, yeah, good job. And nothing. That's it. You know, I'm like, nobody's doing the work. So I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to do this myself. And I started taking kids on field trips and working with kids. And that's where that's where I needed to be. And that's training our replacements. So I guess, my wake up call was, when I first did that first field trip, with those young men and seeing them not wanting to be in their conditions. That's where I knew that's where I was supposed to be.
Man, that's great. Training our replacement. That is important. It goes back to what you have shared, that years from now, if we don't do our job, it's just going to be crazy for the Black community. So we have to be responsible enough to take charge and train the next generation to be leaders, to be innovators, to think critically, to challenge the status quo, to achieve great success, whatever it takes to make sure they don't fall prey to the social construct that sometimes really get to some of our young men today. So I really appreciate, man, you're doing a great work, at a young age, and just your commitment. And as you said, you have always been challenged at home to do more than the ordinary. And I think that is also important, having that foundation. And it's, as they said, it's hard to, let me not say, because I don't remember the exact saying, but once you build a foundation, it's easier to, even if you stray from it, you will get back to what the foundation that have been instilled in you. So it's important and that's where the family comes in, and that's where the men comes in to help to build the foundation for the next generation. So which leads me to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and that can benefit this current generation?
Nobody cares. That's a huge lesson that men and boys need to learn early. Nobody cares. Those bills are still going to be due in the morning. Your kids still going to want some cereal. I always explain it like that. Once we understand that nobody's here to feel sorry for us and things still have to get done, realizing that the things that you've gone through and the terrible things that have happened are all pieces of a pie that you get to eat. Because I have yet to meet any successful person that didn't go through terrible things, that didn't go through a bout of depression, or that didn't go through trauma that happened when they were younger or whatever. Some things happen, bad things happen. Those things are there to make you stronger. So when somebody comes to me and says, oh, I've been through this, my mom was on drugs, my dad beat me, this or that, and whatever, I'm like, good. You have the recipe now to become fantastic. Because the most fantastic people have had all these things happen to them. You have the recipe to become great right now. So it's up to you to decide to put those ingredients together and bake a pie. Even a pizza. People don't even realize, like, a pizza has to go through it. Somebody beating you, tossing you up in the air, messing you around, rolling you out, throwing all this stuff on top of you and weighing you down, putting you through the fire just for you to come out, and now everybody wants you. So again, it's important for us to see, what's happening, what's going on, and realizing that nobody cares. People are still hungry. People still want to eat. So you got to go through it. Pizza has to go through it because people are hungry. Your kids are hungry. Your family needs you. Your community needs you. You have to go through it. There is no life where there's nothing happening. If you're having a life where nothing's happening and everything's good, then you need to figure out, are you on the right track? Because there's nowhere in scripture, there's nowhere in real life, nowhere in success where folk went going through stuff. You were going through things. Everybody had to go through it, from Jesus, whatever, you name it, the success story. I'll show you all the hardship. Hardship is a gift. Pain is a gift. Realize that.
That's a great reminder. Pain is the gift. The recipe, the struggle is the recipe for success. That's a great saying. So that's a great reminder. We have to realize that no one really cares. And if things are going to change, we have to change it. And that's what I do believe. We can call on the politicians in our community, and we can march. And if we march and do nothing, then nothing's going to change, because still it's going to come to us. We can share our opinion and voice our opinions and what we see needs to change. But we need to get down there too and do our part to change. And I think once we do that, I think that's when people will come and board, because everybody like to see success. So if you're doing the work and show your success, others will come and join forces with you. So I really appreciate you sharing that reminder and what we need to learn, and everyone needs to learn, especially the next generation, that nobody cares. We have to do our part to make sure the work gets done. But before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find you and help support the great work that you are doing to make a difference?
Yes, you could find us on social media at New Emerging King or at the X for Boys. Or you can go to our website at thexforboys.org. That's THEXFORBOYS.org. That'll take you everywhere you need to be, show you all of our videos, show you how to donate, show you all of our videos, pictures, photos, social media pages, upcoming events, sign up for our email list. That will show you everything that you need to see. Thexforboys.org. That's where you can go to support us and find everything.
Okay, man. Thank you. And I will definitely be putting it in the description so they can reach out to you to support. Man, you're doing such a great work.
Thank you.
People who are listening, please support Mr. Randall and the work that he's doing, because he is impacting those young boys in his community. And the most that we can do to support is give to the cause so the work can continue. So as I said, I'll put it in the description so they can reach out to you to support the work that you're doing. And my final question to you is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
I think the impact that I want to have will be seen 2 to 3 generations from now. I want to have created a life to where my children will remember the things that I taught them and go and impact the world in that way, to the point where my name continues to ring. So the impact that I want to see will not be seen by me. My great-grandchildren will witness it. My great-great-grandchildren will witness it. I want to be that picture they put on their wall growing up, and say, our grandfather, our father is the man who helped mold and shape this community and the ideas that are being pushed in this community, and not just our community. It could be in other communities, but I want to see all of the children that, come from me go and shape the world. That's what I want to see happen. So the changes that I want to see, like I said, may be seen by my great grandkids, but the impact that I want to see is how we have fixed our own community. I believe in helping where I live. That's the city of Albany, Georgia. I want to see the city of Albany, Georgia thrive one day. That's what I believe in. We were at one point the 4th poorest city in the whole country, and I intend to stay here and develop it from that. So whatever I need to do, make money, whatever, we're going to do what we can to make this into a thriving city, and a city that my children own.
You have the mindset, and I think you do have the determination, because just listening to you and when I read your bio and the work that you have accomplished at a young age, you have as you would say, the ingredients to make it happen. And I think you're on your way to really make it happen, because you seems to be that determined person to make things happen. And one thing, everyone can see is that you don't wait for things to happen. You make things happen. And once you are a person who make things happen, man, anything is possible. It may not happen tomorrow, but with the effort and commitment, which you exemplify, great things can happen. So, man, I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for being here on the Black Male Impact today.
Thank you for having me. I totally appreciate being here.
Man, it's a pleasure having you. And listeners, as always, our goal is to bring guests that we believe will share insights and perspective that can be beneficial to all of us as we continue to build our community and change the narrative, especially in preparing the next generation to be better than we are today. Please continue to support us here at the Black Male Impact as we continue to do the work that we believe will make a difference. Remember, the Black Male Impact is where positive changes are inspired. Thanks for being here, and looking forward to see you again. Thank you.